Hello there. So you think you want to get into the cannabis business in New Jersey? Be part of a fast-growing $33 billion industry in the United States. Own a dispensary, perhaps. Grow, manufacture, or own a testing lab. Well, on February 22nd of 2021, Governor Murphy signed into law the legislation to set up a recreational marketplace after New Jersey voters voted by a 60% margin, and they approved a ballot question to legalize adult use. And except for cultivators, there are no limits on the number of available cannabis licenses. So the rush is on. And if you want to jump in, apply for a cannabis license, and eventually welcome customers through your doors, you're going to want to know what it's going to take: the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, hi there, I'm Melanie Willoughby, and I'm Executive Director of the New Jersey Business Action Center in the Department of State. And for the last 40 years, we've helped businesses of all sizes to grow, start, and thrive in New Jersey. We're business advocates, and we are here for all businesses in the state. Now, we don't do policy and we don't regulate, but we're here to connect you with all the resources you need in order to thrive here. So today, though, I'm here to talk about cannabis, and I'm joined by some of the sharpest minds and top leaders on the front lines of the New Jersey cannabis community. We're going to talk about what you can expect to spend in time, money, and resources, and to go from idea, application, from approval, opening your doors, from sales and cash flow to taxes and profits. Now grab a pen, paper, and get ready to take notes, because what they say is going to be incredibly valuable to you. Now, I'm going to ask the tough questions so you can decide whether this business is really for you. We're in your corner, and we want you to succeed. And that's why we're having this conversation today and why it's so important. So, my guests today are Sarah Trent, attorney in medical cannabis dispensary; Jessica Gonzalez, attorney for a number of successful cannabis licensee applicants; Tahir Johnson, social equity applicant and conditional licensee in Ewing for a recreational dispensary; Robert Mejia, Stockton University professor and cannabis entrepreneur; Art Hance of Hance Construction. He's been building these dispensaries; Stacy Udall, CPA, also representing a number of successful applicants; and Mayor Janice Kovach, current president of the New Jersey League of Municipalities, who's been speaking to towns on this issue. So I want to say a big welcome to all of you, and thanks for joining us today to help potential cannabis entrepreneurs, especially those who are considering to apply as social equity, legacy, or micro businesses and impact zone candidates. Now, the New Jersey Business Action Center and the Secretary of State's office will be providing no cost, tax revenue funded technical assistance to applicants in these categories. We realize the first step, even before applying, is to have the essential big picture information that you need to decide whether to get into the cannabis industry in the first place. So, I'm going to start with my first question, and it's going to have to do with money, money, money. Now, we've talked with applicants who've spent at least $100,000 to apply for a conditional license, and consultants, attorneys, and accountants. And they've said some of them have spent right up to $500,000. Now, to be clear, the state's fees for a conditional application is no more than $200. Now, I'm going to oversimplify the conditional application process briefly. It is an abbreviated process, requires less paperwork, no municipal approvals, or site control. Items required include a background disclosure information for everyone with a financial interest, income certification, a 20-page business plan, and a plan for management of operations, obtaining insurance coverage, and regulatory compliance. So now I'm going to toss this question to one of our first folks, and that's going to be to Sarah. And Sarah, if you can give me your perspective on raising the money you needed.
Yeah, so I think you brought up a really great question, Melanie, right off the bat. you need money to get that conditional application submitted to the state, but you're also going to need to raise money to finish that application, get it through the finish line, and then also to build out your facility. So I think planning ahead and being able to, uh, get that money in the bank while you're preparing that conditional conversion application is important. Right now, there are a lot of conditional licenses out there. It is a very hard market to raise money in. I can tell you how I did it, and that's going to family and friends and asking that it takes roughly about $1 million to get your standalone single dispensary off the ground. So I get that question all the time. How much money do I need to raise? And you can think roughly about $1 million for a standalone dispensary.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So I'm now going to throw it to Tahir because of the fact that he has now a dispensary in Ewing. And how did you raise your money, Tahir?
Sure. And so I would say a lot of the points that Sarah hit are very valid. A big part of the process being able to raise money was first being able to develop like I said, that business plan. The pitch deck was very essential to be able to raise capital. So I went out to private investors to raise money. And I actually raised my capital in two different kind of areas. First, I raised capital for my real estate acquisition. I'm actually doing the webinar here from inside the home of my future dispensary for the first time. But I had to acquire the building and the parking lot. Altogether, that was $1.1 million to be able to do that. In addition to that, I raised an additional $750,000 from investors to be able to finance the business. So all in, we're looking at almost $2 million. So it definitely was like being able to have like the pitch, be able to have your projections on the business, all those things were important to be able to gain investors' confidence in operation.
So Tahir, let me just follow up with that on how you actually found those investors.
Sure. Well, one of the things that I'll say that I'm thankful for is that I've had a lot of opportunities for, press, and my story being told in the industry. But I did a lot of outreach myself. When you're traveling to different conferences, LinkedIn, all these different ways where you're coming across people that are interested in investing in the industry. And in particular, it was an introduction that was made through an industry friend where I found my particular person that I probably met with dozens, literally dozens of different financing people. And it's interesting because there is a number of different types of investors out there, right? You have both debt and equity investors, but I found that there were a lot of people in the market that were predatory because they realized that, as a social equity applicant or an applicant in general, I even remove social equity for anybody is tough and difficult to go through. But they kind of see that you have that need, and some people want to try to take advantage of that, try to take your business. So I was thankful that I was able to find good investors to be able to work with. But where I was also going is that in terms of investments, there's different types, right? There's debt and equity. So you talk about debt, that's being able to take on a loan, with somebody being able to give you money, which is difficult. We're in an environment now where interest rates are going up even more. But also equity, where you're able to give a portion of equity in your business to an investor to be able to fund business. And I actually, did an equity investment in my, in the business. So that
Right.
was how I went about doing it.
Oh, thank you, Tahir. That was very, very helpful. I hope everyone is taking notes on how you did it. So I'd like to throw it out to the other panelists now if they have any helpful hints on how to raise money, especially since we're now saying we need over $1 million. Okay. Well, I do know that as far
I
as
was on mute.
oh, you were on mute. Oh, Jessica, thank you.
I wanted to chime in on here because I do get this question, quite often of, well, how do I get somebody to notice me? How do I get somebody to invest in me and to trust in me? And what I tell a lot of the applicants that I work with is this is not an industry where you can hide under a rock and sort of hope to God that somebody knows who you are or your story or what you've done. It is an industry that is still quite risky for a lot of these investors. So it's the trust that you need to create. So like, to hear, it's just a really fabulous example because he's been doing this work for a very, very long time. He's been in the advocacy space. He has helped out with different organizations. He's put on, different events of his own. So it's been a lot of years in the making to really create that trust. So it all really comes down to your brand name. So what brand name are you creating? What is the goodwill attached to that brand name? Because essentially these investors, they're investing in you, but they're also investing in that brand name. So for a lot of folks who really, haven't gone out there, or especially sometimes legacy operators who we're sort of telling them to do the opposite of what they've known to do historically, which is sort of hide sort of in the shadows. And now we're telling them you have to come out into the light, you have to share your story, you have to start getting involved in organizations, start getting involved in advocacy, start getting involved in your municipality. It's a very different ask than what they've had to do for a very long time. So I'm very sensitive to that. However, because of the amount of competition, because of really, there is money out there, you do have to go out there and find it. But you have to make sure that you have a really solid story, a really solid plan, and a lot of goodwill attached to your name to really create that trust. So I think, as I tell folks, advocacy is one of the best ways to get press. To get press, go to a municipal hearing, go to a CRC hearing. If that's, your start, then I think it's a great one, but you really need to start getting your name out there.
Yes, and in addition, Jess made me think, I'll think of even more. I'll say in addition to telling your story, that I mean that's a really huge part of it. Making sure that you have a team of professionals around you, including a great attorney, is a huge part of trying to make sure that you can properly assess the deal. Having friends like Jessica, as I was been reviewing financial options, she's been talking to her for probably almost 2 years about stuff like this. And then ultimately, when it comes to reviewing the contract, and for me, the thing that took the longest was the negotiation because there's so many different fine points in the contract that you have to talk about not just getting the money, about control of the company, when's the money dispersed, all these, what type of, standards in your operating agreement, different things you're held to. So it's important to make sure that you have a great attorney and legal professional to help you with it. And even within financing, not investment advice, but I ended up using it like something called a safe document that my attorney ended up drafting. So, there's different vehicles or whatever that people can use to actually invest in business. And that's where you need the advice of professionals to help you figure out what's the best one for your business.
Thank you,
In addition,
Tahir.
I want to bring up that, it can get complicated as more members are added to a business or more shareholders.
Right.
So in addition to counsel, you should speak to accountants to make sure that there's not unintended tax consequences, because that seems to happen a lot. And, we work on returns and we're like, well, this is your situation. And because of this, you're going to end up owing, a couple $100,000, whatever it is. So you have to make sure to talk to the right people ahead of time.
Right. Thank you very much.
And I think, Melanie, a lot of
Yes,
these comments
Rob.
are relating to the importance of building up a team. So one of the big things is that certainly financing is an obstacle, but also in order to get a business like this off the ground, you have to have experts in so many different corners, whether that's in security, or you have to know somebody in construction or somebody in sustainability. Again, attorneys, accountants. You really have to build up such a qualified team. That will also help you get financing. That will also help you ensure that you at least have a chance to succeed in this business, because there are so many different parts that you have to address, certainly in the application, and then afterwards that you have to surround yourself with experts, because all of us know that we cannot do all of it by ourselves.
Right. All good suggestions. It's excellent. Building a team is so very important. I'm going to move on to another question though, but we're going to stay on the money topic. So let's follow the money trail to where a licensee has final and full approval. Now they can actually open the door to business, whether it's a dispensary, a cultivation facility. Now we've heard the cost to convert from conditional to annual can range from $300,000 to $1 million, which we've been talking about. Now, the complete list of what people have to do to submit is very long, but I want to cover a few items. So, in this stage, a conditional licensee must solidify a business location, gain control through lease or purchase, gain municipal approval, and they also have to have standard operating procedures, and they also have to have rules for waste management, inventory control, environmental impact, and safety and security. And all of these actions have to be completed in 120 days. Mm, wow. Now, that's a lot to accomplish in 4 months, and I haven't even talked about the cost to acquire the product. So I'm going to turn it to Art Hance now and ask him, so what are you seeing, Art, in how this process plays out in reality?
We've spoken with over 100 applicants at this point. And what we've seen time and time again, out of that 100, there's only been 3 that realized that once they get a resolution from a town, approving them for dispensary or cultivation, we still need to go through typical land use processes, get site plan approval. Every town or municipality in the state has a land use ordinance, is the law of the town if you're going to do any development. And site plan process or a planning board approach is the way that the town makes sure that your project is going to follow those rules. To do that, you will need an attorney who is well versed in land use. You will need a civil engineer. And typically, particularly if it's a cultivation facility, you will need people to advise you on the construction of the facility. Your architect will have to generate drawings to be submitted, civil engineering drawings. Typically, we have 5 of these in process right now at different levels. We just completed one Monday night. And a site plan approval, just for the civil engineering and architecture, can typically run anywheres, and Sarah, you can chime in because you've just gone through one. Anywheres from $20,000 or $25,000 up to multiple hundreds of thousands. Upon the complexity of the project, whether or not you're going before DEP for approvals, there's many factors that go into it. And it's critical that when people are looking at a site, they involve professionals up front to identify what that process is. One site may have a much longer approval process. In New Jersey, if you need to get on a sewer service map, you could be 5 years away from getting approvals.
Well, Art, I appreciate that, but I wanted to clarify in terms of attorneys. You said you need a land use attorney. Is that different than the attorney that's helping you through the application process? Or can sometimes that be the same attorney?
Could be the same. The puzzling thing that we've seen is that many of these applicants have been advised through the process by an attorney, but don't know that they still need to go for planning board approval. And that's a huge shock to a lot of people. Conditional license can fail for it because they didn't realize the additional cost.
Got it. Okay, I appreciate it.
Can I just throw something in there?
Absolutely.
Land use, someone who understands municipal land use is so important because we are a home rule state. Each of us has our own set of ordinances. And if you have an attorney that's never been in front of the land use board before, you need to have someone that's savvy enough to understand how the board's going to work and has probably presented in front of that board before as well to understand the nuances of the personalities. I mean, we all have the responsibility to uphold the land use, but that doesn't mean it necessarily will be made easy on the process.
Well, thank you, Mayor.
Having the right team in place is critical. As Janice has said, if you have a land use team before a board on a regular basis, they can make a phone call, find out what's missing in an application, and be more expeditious in getting that approval. The other point I'd like to bring up is those 100 people, I think the vast majority of them, a friend or a contact in a town. Realize that There are very few people who are going to break the law of that town to get you an approval more quickly than anyone else. So we hear of all these friends. I don't know if it's the same person or not, but it typically does not work out in the end. You have to go through the process.
Right. Absolutely, Art.
And add to that, because I can, Art, everything you're saying is spot on, and because I'm actually going through this process right now as we speak. Like I literally just picked up my drawings from the architect yesterday. And like you said, I had to engage a number of professionals. There was the engineer, there was the architect. My internal COO has 20 years in real estate development experience, so that also helped me to kind of navigate the process. But like you said, we engaged a local land use attorney, and I actually asked my town planner has been a valuable asset in all this, going back and forth to be able to find out guidance on what we need to do. And like you said, recommend somebody that's been before the board a number of times, because it's a completely different attorney than I do. In my case, it was a different attorney than who we used for the application process. So I wanted somebody that was specifically they navigate this process every day, both inside and outside of cannabis. Like you said, having those relationships, being somebody that they're familiar with makes all the difference in the world, and being able to get it done. So that is like that, and like I said, the steps after the local approval, things you have to get to do before you actually build out are super important concerns. So now I'm even thinking about how do we get started before like the ground starts freezing and stuff like that, trying to move it along.
Thank you.
I was just gonna,
Go on, Sarah.
Just to make a final point, I think that a lot of people look to take a shortcut through these processes. You're filling out your initial application, your follow-up to convert, going for land use approvals. Follow the rules. Towns do not like you coming in and trying to slam bam through the process. There is a set of rules to follow them, and you will find that you will go through. I mean, it may look daunting and there's a lot of steps involved. If you follow the rules, chances are you're going to get through much more quickly than if you try to do it in a blizzard mode.
Right. Sarah, you had some comment you also wanted to add as someone who just went through this.
so yes, I mean, we were just, Art mentioned the DEP engineers, and there are going to be random things that pop up that you will have to think out of the box on how to fix. For instance, on a dispensary side, you might have a limited parking lot, as we do. And so we actually had to go out and find who knew that this even existed, a parking engineer, but that is an actual profession. And so on a cultivation site, you may have to address maybe limited water access. Maybe you're drilling a new well. These are very, very site-specific things that are going to require specific professionals outside of what we even just spoke about. That was number one. Number two, a lot of talk about land use attorneys. And yes, that land use attorney is key. I'm a lawyer and I still have a land use attorney. But I don't want to underestimate those personal relationships. Yes, you have to play by the rules and follow the rules, but the fact that I've been appearing in front of the planning board, in front of the council, even when we're not on the agenda, I want to know what's going on in town. I want to know what's going on at my neighbor's address. So they know me. Everybody knows me. And it means a lot. And it really did enable us to move through the site plan approval process much more quickly than others, I think, because in a lot of ways, and for instance, they held a special meeting when it wasn't going to be moving through quickly enough. So yes, you follow the rules, but there are, build those personal relationships. You are going to be, doing business in that town for years and years to come, hopefully. So you need to start out on the right foot.
So Sarah, what you're really saying is about becoming an integral member of the community. So that they feel that you really belong there and you feel that you belong there. So I'm going to move on to our next question, which is still money. And it's going to be, so how long is it going to take for you to turn a profit? now? Is it 3 years? Is it more? And how do you meet expenses in the meantime by keeping a roof over your head, feeding your family? And recently we read a report on a cannabis company in Canada, and it was founded in 1986, and only last year, 37 years later, did it turn a profit. So I hope that doesn't happen here in New Jersey. But what is a realistic time frame to become profitable with a dispensary? So, Jessica, I'd like to turn to you as someone who has worked with companies across the United States. What have you seen so far?
The average that I have seen and that I've heard is about 3 years. It can be also up to 5. But who I am going to definitely kick this question over to Stacy. And one thing that I do want to say, while attorneys absolutely necessary, very integral to the process, accountants are super underrated in this industry. They are absolutely so necessary that one of the first questions I ask an applicant is, who is your CPA? If they don't have one, we certainly make that introduction. But really, I think what we're getting into the conversation about is 280E as to why it is so difficult to really turn a profit. And I'm a very stay in my lane type of person. So Stacy, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about 280E.
Great. Thank you, Stacy.
So, and Jessica is 100% right, with the time periods, and they vary also, depending on, are you leasing your facility, are you buying your facility, and, all those things are going to come into play when figuring out how much profit you're going to make and when you're going to finally break even. A micro is different than a regular license because you're limited to the personnel you can have and all that. We work with clients, we go through and figure out how much money they're going to need to get to the operational standpoint, and a few months, and then the time, right before they open, and the training and all that. We work through those types of projections with clients so that we can get a feel on what it's going to take and how much money they need to raise. By looking at what we expect to happen, we can kind of back into it. And what we're seeing in other markets, as people know, as our market expands, the prices are going to go down. So,
Right.
and the prices are going to go down, and competition is going to go up. So it's very difficult. And dispensaries, on top of that, have what Jessica was saying, 288. And one of the first questions when I get a call from a client saying I want to open a dispensary, one of the first questions I ask is, do you know the tax consequences? And I do get people, I've had 2 or 3 over the course of the last year, not know what 280E was. And what 280E is it says you can only deduct the cost of sales. So you can't deduct any selling, general, or administrative costs. So with a dispensary, for example, if the dispensary has $1 million worth of sales and its products cost $500,000, they're going to be taxed on $500,000. That doesn't, there's still other expenses. They might have another $400,000 in other expenses. So a non-cannabis business is going to pay taxes on $100,000, where a cannabis business is paying them on $500,000. So cannabis businesses can lose money because of Section 280E. New Jersey is likely going to decouple from that. So New Jersey is not going to be taxed that way. And, I don't know how long we'll be taxed that way under the IRS. I think that it's all, a crapshoot at this point. I mean, they've been talking about different legislation that would get rid of 280E. But we don't know how long it's going to take or what kind of tax is going to replace that, because there's probably going to be another tax. And, we don't know what level it's going to be. Is it going to be the level of the business, or is it going to be, passed to the consumer, like a sales tax? And if it is passed on, to business, that still ends up meaning it's going to come back down to the consumer. So, in the beginning, I think businesses, there's going to be like a curve, and businesses are going to start off, and then they're going to grow they'll grow fast and be, great revenue, and they're going to see their revenue go down. It's just natural. It's going to, and, then when, if there's businesses failing around, you might be able to pick up more market share and things like that. But, we don't want businesses to fail. So you really do need to build a team with you to ensure that you don't fail. Develop those relationships. Tahir knows, he's at events, going out and meeting cultivators and manufacturers and developing relationships so that he can have product to sell when he opens.
Right.
Yeah, and I also think like this is why it's also really important, when you're preparing your business plan. And one thing here in New Jersey is we really almost have three different types of business plans. There's the one for the conditional application, there's the one for the annual, because both have different requirements, and then there's one that you use to go out and to solicit funds and get investors. And sometimes what come across my desk are these very grandiose business plans, right? So for example, as a retailer, you are allowed to both, you're allowed to deliver, you're allowed to have a consumption lounge if your town allows. And sometimes applicants get very excited about the fact they could potentially do all three. And then I start asking them, well, what about your delivery vehicles? And how about your employees and the technology and the GPS and everything that has to go along with it? So I tell them in the beginning, I would come out with a business plan that's very intentional and well thought out, but not one that is so grandiose, because you're also going to need to show the CRC that you have the funds to justify that business plan. So if it is extremely complex, you're trying to do everything under the sun the moment that you open, you need to show that the funds to do so. So we really encourage an incremental approach. So we say, start out with the fundamental aspect of your business, and as you grow, you can really add more aspects to that. But you've got to be very intentional in the beginning about exactly what you want to do and what funds you have to support your dreams.
Thank you,
I agree
Jessica.
with Jessica. Often we try to, have a schedule of, a sources and uses schedule, basically. I have this is the money I have, and this is enough to take me to get through until I'm profitable. Because that's what the CRC wants to see. They want to know that the business is going to survive. And so we try to show, help show that financially in the business plan.
Right. Thank you, Stacy. So, Art, if you can jump in, because you're talking about, building that building, and it could potentially take so long because of the permits you need. So, what are your
Well,
thoughts
and
on this?
I think that particularly on the cultivation side, we've concentrated a lot on the dispensary side. On the cultivation side, it's critical that people really look into all the things that go into it, all the personal protective equipment, your PPE that you need, all of the services that you'll need for pest control outside of the structure, and all the things that go into it. You see so many people that concentrate on starting out with this grand cultivation plan. Many of these people have not grown commercially. In the legacy market on a small scale, they were excellent growers. Commercially growing cannabis is a completely different process, and they need to understand that and walk before they run. Better off conserving capital. I love the comment about starting off a little bit slowly and being conservative. Save the cash. You don't need to build out 5 rooms to start. If you pack 5 rooms and are making mistakes, you will lose 5 rooms. Start out with 1 or 2 rooms, get them produced, and work through the issues and the workflow and get efficient. The other thing is stress efficiency in your design, because we will soon, every market out there. Look at some of the old Michigan right now is selling for $700 a pound or less. You need to be very efficient in your operation. I see people opening dispensaries that have 12, 15 employees. Are you going to be able to support that many employees 3 years from now? So really look at efficiency. And from the standpoint of a cultivation facility or any post-harvest plant touching, you have to look at GMP, which is going to be a requirement that the federal government is going to push once they legalize cannabis. When that happens, many of the growth facilities that have been built not recover from that hit. They will have to modify for operations, which means that they will have to take those facilities down completely or partially. So it'll be a hit to the cash flow for the changes in the building. It'll be a hit to their cash flow and production. Plan ahead.
Thank you, Art. Very, very wise. So now we've talked about investment, the costs, cash flow, and profit. Now let's talk again about where folks can find the money to do this. Tahir gave us a couple of ideas, but how do you get those investors to really decide that they want to invest in you? So how also do you negotiate contracts for product? Buy a bank vault grade safe? And what are some of the biggest threats around predatory lending? So that's a lot packed into one question, but I'm going to start with Rob Mejia, who is with us, and I'm sure that he's going to be able to cover the gamut.
Well, that is so much to take on in sort of one big question. I'm sure all of us are going to have to chime in a little
I
bit.
think
But I would
so.
sort of go back to Jess's theme about having to network. I mean, the big thing is that you do have to get out there and make those connections so that you can start to develop your own credibility so people know that you are dependable. They know why you're in the industry. I think we might have actually even kind of jumped over that part a little bit, but I think before anybody even starts to ask their family and friends for money, or even starts to think about whether they want to cultivate or go into any aspect of the cannabis business, I think you have to have a real tough conversation with yourself and find out why it is you want to do it. I mean, is it a passion project for you? Do you think you're going to get rich from it? Is it just exciting because it's a new and different industry? I mean, all those things can be true. But at the same time, if your goal is just to make money, you'd be better off developing a cleaning service or starting an auto repair or something with many fewer regulations, many fewer headaches, and something that is clearly needed. So I think you have to have a real passion and a real sense and a real understanding of what it is you want to do. And then you definitely have to network to build up all the kind of connections that you can. And as you help other people, the one thing I found is that I've helped other people, that I can also ask them for connections for others that I'm working with or people who are trying to raise funds. So it really is. I mean, we're New Jersey. We are so connected. We always know somebody who knows somebody else. And if you are genuine and if you show that you're in there for the right reason, I think you can tap into your network and that really leads you to other places. So you might have a direct connection to somebody who's going to then lead you to an investor. And they'll tell that investor, this person is credible. And here's why. I've worked with them. I know why they're doing this. They have a good plan. So I would think sort of getting out there as much as possible is one of the big things. And also for you helping other people, that will bring connections to you as well. So I think that's probably the biggest part. And then I would say to Sarah's point about friends and family, that if you do raise in that way, the average sum that you'll raise is probably between about 25,000 up to 100,000. That's been the average contribution, at least in the reports for the last couple of years. And then again, having the solid business plan so that somebody can look at it and see how investing in cannabis pairs to something else they can invest in, because clearly they can take their money and go to a lot of different areas. Money is so needed right now. So I would say those were the big points. And then from there, I will let somebody else take the baton.
Well, before they do, though, I just wanted to ask you to mention your book because I know you have written a book on cannabis, and it could be very good source for folks.
But I have, and that sort of goes to looking at why you're in the business and what you're doing. But I did write the Essential Cannabis book, and I wrote the Essential Cannabis Journal, and I do write for New Jersey Cannabis Insider. So when you do decide to jump into this industry, you may have knowledge about one part of the business or none of it, but you definitely have to up your education in cannabis across all levels. If you're in cultivation, you need to know what happens in processing, you need to know what happens in retail, you need to know ancillary. You really need to 360 your knowledge of what happens in the cannabis area. So I would say that cannabis education is also a cornerstone of you being successful in the business, because you'll also make connections that will help you to set up a more viable and longer lasting and more successful business as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me go to the mayor and see what her thoughts are on how people can stay afloat. I know she's got a lot of knowledge in this area.
Sure, thank you. I think there's, to everyone's point, there is business plan is the key. And I think that's for almost anything that you do, understanding what you need to operate for the period of time until you see an actual profit turning. and a willingness to put your money where your mouth is and really put yourself out there. It's, any new business is not easy. This is an industry that is brand new to so many. And I know that, it's been interesting because I've had a number of individuals who have come to town with, they're going to make a lot of money and they're going to give a lot of money to the town. And when you start to drill down, you don't see the meat behind the business plan. And that's usually where I send everyone back to them. I go back to the drawing board. You really, you need to understand what this is going to be, what this is going to cost you and your family, because investors are also looking that you have skin in the game. Unless you got someone, you've got that individual, the angel investor who's just going to write money because they've got nothing better to do. Like in the movies, if someone wants to be an executive producer and they're willing to write a check and not worry about whether or not they get it back, you need to be able to show. And I think Tahir brought it up before as well as Jess, the ownership of the business and how many, how much are you going to dilute it, and who's going to be the owner of the business. There's just so much there. And my first thing is to go back to the business plan every single time. I'm a process person, so I like process.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Let me ask you a question, though, about the fact that we have a number of limited municipalities that are open now to allowing cannabis in their borders. Do you think that's going to expand?
I absolutely do. Here, this is what I try to let everyone know, and everyone who's in the industry, this is what you eat, sleep, and breathe. This is less than 1% or 0.5% of what I do in any given day. In addition to the fact that we all came through a pandemic and, governments, local municipalities have been struggling to redefine and kind of understand what the new normal is. So, while some of us had the ability to educate ourselves as the we knew it was going to be on the ballot. So, I had the opportunity through the league to take a lot of time. Not everyone did. So you're asking us to
add,
what's that?
Oh, no, go right ahead. No,
I said, you're asking us to change 60 years of behavior in 60 days. I think once we see what works, you'll start to see more and more towns open up to it. They also want to know who they're doing business with. The last thing you want is, especially in this particular industry, because it's still there's still a stigma attached to it, that whoever they're going to do business with is someone that, Sarah's point, will fit within the community, who cares about the community, who's going to give back to the community, who's going to be a part of the community. I know from my perspective, and this is not a knock to the MSOs, but I'm more interested in seeing the micro licenses and the individuals who are true local New Jersey residents having the opportunity before, the guys in suits or the women in suits, kind of coming in and trying to do business that way.
thank
Yeah,
you, Mayor.
a couple of the forces that are affecting municipalities that are starting to consider opting in is that they're looking at they're seeing that other townships are successfully navigating their ways, are inviting businesses there. So it's been less drama than they expected, is one. And then two, you have new elected officials. And sometimes they are more open to the process because they have a new perspective. They may not know about things. So just in the past couple of weeks, I've been contacted by 2 city councils that just want to have kind of an open forum and talk about what would this look like in our township. So I am seeing those kind of winds of change coming, and then you do have some economic uncertainty in some communities, and so certainly they're also looking at the dollars as well. So it feels like we do have so many townships that opted out, but it feels like there is kind of a small wave coming.
Well, keep in mind, New Jersey has elections every single year. And the closer you get to an election, the harder it is to really get anything done that has any taint of controversy to it. So, you're going to kind of, someone's going to campaign against an incumbent. Well, I'm going to make sure cannabis never comes to my town. Not even understanding what they're talking about most of the times. I have encouraged all of the mayors that reach out to me. I put them in touch with different individuals to have conversations. A number of towns have done town halls. I had a town hall back when the governor first signed in July of 19, the medical. We did a town hall, and it's an opportunity for residents to understand, kind of what's going on. We're all in this kind of virtual world now. So there are more and more resident participations happening when towns keep their Zoom open. So we're driven by our voters. And while most towns, passed it overwhelmingly, and this isn't, I don't think this is unique to cannabis. I think this is anything. It's like I move into my town now, I don't want anything in my backyard. So it's the not in my backyard mentality. And that's warehousing, that's a store, that's new homes, it's anything.
Right.
So, yeah, and I'd like to add a few things here, but I'm gonna take this in about like 3 different directions. So 1, talking about strategy, 2, about patience, and then keeping the ball sort of in your court. So really in terms of strategy, so like Janice, you were talking about all of these municipalities that are sort of starting to opt in. So especially for the conditional applicants, I tell them this is a game of strategy and timing. So when you're thinking about versus going annual versus going to conditional, that is really an analysis of when you actually want to get operational. Everybody wants to get approved for licensure fast. What I tell them is, do you want to just be approved for licensure, or do you actually want to be operational? And there's a very big difference just sort of between the two in terms of timing. So when you're thinking about, the conditional license, there were a lot of folks who said, December 15th, March 15th, I want to get my conditional application in as soon as possible. I had clients who are absolutely pressuring me and my team to get these in, and we just kept pushing back and saying, why? You are not close to getting site control. You are not close to getting proof of local support. Your municipality is not even opted in. You're trying to get them out. It may take a lot of time. You are essentially shortening your timeline by trying to apply as fast as you can. It all is about strategy. So the way that I tell them is you have to operate on parallel tracks. And the first thing you should concentrate on is, where do you want to be located? If you don't yet know where you want to be located and you haven't started the process of looking for property, you have not started the process of reaching out to council members, reaching out to other municipal officials, you should not really be starting your conditional application right now. You should really be focusing on that. Once you start narrowing that down, then you can, on simultaneous tracks, be preparing your conditional application while you're pursuing municipal approval. What a lot of applicants did is put forth their application for a conditional and then decided we're just going to wait some time. And then when we get approved, we're going to start looking into the municipal process. And that's why they're running into a lot of issues, because now I'm going to get into my conversation about patience. I think in this industry, there's this like very big like FOMO, fear of missing out, and everybody just wants to be first, and everybody wants to get sort of ahead of line. So I tell a lot of applicants, you can be one of the first. There's a cost associated with being one of the first, and I'm sure Sarah, you can definitely attest to this as well. So if they want to be that, they have to understand that there is a sacrifice and that there is a cost. So in terms of patience, if you are not patient with your application process and you don't honor it the way that you should, and you just want to get something in because you're looking at all of these headlines that say New Jersey's approving 500 something applications, and your friends are telling you that they already have their conditional license, I tell applicants, keep your blinders on. Do not focus on what anybody else is doing or whatever the news is reporting. Stay the course. See, the reason why patience is so important is because let's say you submitted your conditional application, you received your conditional license, you have your 120 days. Now you have this 120 days to negotiate with a landlord and get municipal approval. And guess what? This landlord may know that you're now on this time crunch. So now who has the ball? Who has the competitive advantage now? It is the landlord. But if you don't have that time constraint running up against you, you don't have the time to look for other properties, to look for other towns without having that pressure of the time. So in terms of keeping the ball in your court, if you don't have that patience, that's when you start entering into predatory deals. And to hear, I know you definitely have gone sort of through this process. So you really need to take your time, because when you are under that time crunch, you're going to enter into bad deals. You may enter into a very predatory deal with a loan or a lender or anything that happens. So give yourself that time, that really cushion of time, to be able to say, you know what? Not all money is good money. But a lot of folks are such in a time crunch to get this in as soon as possible. And I just tell them to take your time and to make sure that everything is done correctly and in the way that you want it to be the most. Because if not, you take your competitive advantage and you put it in the hands of investors, landlords, and municipalities. And you have to understand there are certain things you can control. There are certain things you can't control. You can control when you prepare the application. You can't control when a municipality is going to give you that approval. So focus on what you can control or what you can't control first, and then on what you can control.
Thank you, Jessica. And we're going to be going into a wrap up now. But I'd like Art to see if he has any comments on this, because certainly in the what you can control and can't control is probably something that he's very, very knowledgeable about.
We are working on a couple of applicants right now, will be applicants. We are taking them to a site, we're looking at developing it, working with that town to enact an ordinance with cannabis. For me, it's wonderful because I can help them put the tools in to make sure that the cannabis licensee does things properly. I'm out building buildings trying to force people to put in certain measures for odor control. They don't always want to spend that money. If it's part of the ordinance, they have no choice. Things for security that work very well, and we can show the town how well it works up front, and it's cost effective for the applicant, put that built into the ordinance. So I think I think when you approach these towns that have not opted in and are thinking of doing it, you really have to look at being fair to all the stakeholders. It is imperative that the people in the town are not adversely affected. It's also understood that you have to make a profit for this to be successful and for the town to enjoy that revenue stream. One final thing is that if we talked about earlier, and we've talked to a number of people about it, sometimes it's better to be working in the industry than try to be the industry. We've seen people who have taken that advice and gone out and worked for some of the MSOs and come back to us and said, had we taken a license and tried to cultivate, we would have failed. So there were so many things we didn't know.
Very good, Art. Thank you so much. That's excellent advice. So I really, really want to, at this point, thank all of our panelists who are experts in their field, and you can tell that they all have great advice that they have offered. It's been quite an educational session, chock full of great information, and I really want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time today. So we'll see you around. Stay tuned, because the New Jersey Business Action Center Cannabis Training Academy is going to be starting very soon. And you'll probably see many of these same folks who will probably be teaching at the Academy. So thank you and have a great day.